You are now listening to the Select Gaming Podcast.
So this topic has been a long one coming. Anybody who's been following, I guess, the sort of the Intellivision Amico.
I'm sorry, what's that? What's that? The Intellivision what?
The Intellivision Amico.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of it.
Oh, come on now. So I know that you don't care too much about it, but for the last sort of 2.5 years, you've heard me pepper things to you every now and then, and I've jokingly, just gone into a GameStop and I've been like, do you guys have the Intellivision Amico yet? And they're like, what? So, I mean...
Sir, this is an Arby's.
Yeah, this is a Wendy's, sir. Can you get the heck out of here? I'll give a little bit of my history with it. And then I kind of want your opinion on, I guess, where I'm at with this thing. And then I guess I have maybe 2 predictions of what may happen. So I guess my history with this sort of this console is one of the things that we've done in the last 2 years is, and one of the reasons why we started this entire channel was emulation, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We got into emulating games, and a really cool thing about that was being able to play a lot of these old games that we've never gotten the chance to play because we weren't even born yet. So the emulation was sort of a way to experience these games that we never had before. And during the pandemic, a lot of the games that I was playing, it was a lot of PS1 games, and then I was sort of delving down the Atari 2600 rabbit hole and the Intellivision rabbit hole, right? Started to really get a nice appreciation for Atari and Intellivision, those 2 companies, and the history of just beginning of everything, right? The beginning of video games in a way. So really developed a nice appreciation for Intellivision. And as I continued to play games, one of the things I was starting to play again was the Earthworm Jim games. And I think it was around 2001 where Googled Earthworm Jim, was sort of like, what's going on in the Earthworm Jim world? And then lo and behold, I happened to come across a new Earthworm Jim game for the Intellivision Amico.
Right.
And I was just like, what is the Intellivision Amico? So went to their official website, watched the trailer, ended up on their YouTube, and lo and behold, it was a voice from the past that I admired. It was Tommy Tallarico.
Right.
And my sort of history with, I guess, Tommy Tallarico is, he and Victor Lucas did Electronic Playground in the early 2000s, right? Great show.
I loved it.
Loved that show, right? Every Saturday, it was like I would watch that show, watch the reviews on the run, and I really loved it. So it's like my youth was sort of EGM, Official US, PlayStation Magazine, PSM, and Electronic Playground. So I thought it was really interesting that this individual he sort of owned the rights to Intellivision, was making the system, and that's kind of what brought me to Intellivision Amico's doorstep. So what did I do? I put a pre-order in. I saw a couple videos. I wouldn't say I was super impressed by what I saw, but I really liked this whole kind of like niche, weird concept of it, right? These pick up and play games. And of course, as time has gone by, this system will probably never come out because of the internal drama and the mismanagement, I guess, of this brand. I guess you've heard me talk about things with this system here and there. You know that I've bought the physical products that they came out with. We did a video review of them here on the Select a while back. From what you know, in your opinion, what are your thoughts? Because I've never really truly heard about what your thoughts are on this whole kind of saga.
The thing is I know I was involved like when in the sort of like nascent days of having like sort of bulletin boards and web forums where you could talk about video games, and people were looking for ROMs and looking for and talking about new consoles and so on. I remember the days of like new consoles being announced and having conversations about them on forums. And the default position was always, this isn't happening. Come on.
Well, you kept saying, you're like, this is going to be vaporware.
Well, the point is that this is like, and this is not an apt comparison because on one side of this equation, you have the multi-billion-dollar operations of Microsoft, and on the other, you have Tommy Tallarico, which is not, and these are not comparable entities. But there was a considerable amount of skepticism of the Xbox coming out, and it wasn't until it came out and I saw Halo at an EB Games, played on a CRT on the kiosk, that seeing was believing. And so my default position was always like, this is embarrassing.
Yeah. Well, I think when there's a new kid on the block, people's first sort of reaction is to be like, this isn't happening. This isn't going to go anywhere. But then it comes out, and then sometimes people are proven wrong or right. This thing to this day has not come out. A lot of it is because they had a lot of money to do this.
Yes.
They had a lot of investors from Republic. They had a lot of investors from many other institutions and whatnot. But the way that this console and this company, I guess, appeared to be operated was that they were operating like they already had a worldwide success. They should have operated like it was a startup company. You had a bunch of, I guess you could say, seasoned people from the video game industry thinking that it was the 90s and that you could kind of get away with the tactics that you were doing back then. Whereas this should have been a niche product. They wanted this to become the next Nintendo Wii, right? And that's not going to happen because there is a next Nintendo Wii. It's called the Nintendo Switch. Okay?
Correct.
To me, the approach that they should have had with this from the get-go was like, listen, we're going to appeal to retro heads who want to see these games reimagined, right? And we'll do the whole family-friendly thing. And we'll hope that catches on. And we'll offer those things. And if it catches on, then we'll go with it. If not, we're going to keep this a niche thing. So this sort of grandeur vision, it was just too big.
I'm on record. I don't think that this console was ever going to come out, right? I didn't think from the very beginning, and I certainly don't think so now. But what would have been so wrong if they had said, okay, we're going to release this thing. It's going to have this controller. It's about the only thing that was genuinely novel about the Amico. And what we're going to do is we're going to get in touch with Activision and all the other people who own the licenses for these old Intellivision games. And we're going to release it like a NES Mini, a Sega Genesis Mini, and so on and so on. At the same time, you say, right, and we're going to have the opportunity to release original games that we develop. And then you could have done your RFID, your physical products that are basically just RFID, and all of these other things that you thought the television folks, Amico and others, thought were clever and game-changing. But they didn't. Because they thought that they were special. And they weren't special. And they don't have, and the industry, and they back themselves into all sorts of corners with really miserable investment plans. It seems like, I don't take financial advice from me, but also may I recommend don't take financial advice from the people who work for Intellivision Amico. And as a result, it's become a bit of a laughing stock. The core idea could have been fine.
Well, the whole thing for me is like I said, I wasn't all that impressed with a vast majority of the games that I was seeing. I was actually a little bit interested in Cloudy Mountain. I'm blanking out. Oh, Night Stalker. So those were these games.
These are original games, to be clear.
Yeah, they were original games, and they were retro reimagined games for the Intellivision Amico. And when I saw the look of those games, I said, if they can do that, if they can do something of a unified look with these games, similar to what Atari is doing to the Atari Recharged series, which I love what they're doing with that. If they can sort of do that with these original games, they're onto something. But they didn't. They weren't thinking in the long term. Here's the thing, and this is what I'm going to say to people. I'm not one of these Amico haters, okay? I'm neither here nor there. I'm just a guy who likes to play games, okay? I started to find out about this drama. We made the video. We made the review of the physical products. I thought everything was peachy keen. I was just, hey, I got these cool things. Let me talk about them. It wasn't until we put that video out that I started to see the drama because people were leaving comments. I was like, what the hell is going on with this thing? And then I started to look it up and I started to look more into it, and I'm like, holy shit, like this is a bit of a mess. Here I was thinking like, oh, this is something that, is going to come out. I'm just going to continue to play my PS4 and my other games, and I'll get this system in a year. Everything's cool, la-di-da. And it wasn't. And then I started to look into it, and I'm like, this is not going good for them, right?
No. The thing is, you have to. I take it in good faith that they were going to. I don't know if it's worse to take the Amico project in good faith and say, actually, they made a bunch of strategic errors and therefore the console is never going to come out.
I don't think I don't think it works, dude. There was a lot of reports that it was lagging. There was a lot of issues with this thing. Now, I think you have to give them the benefit of the doubt with the chip shortage. They lost a year on that, apparently. Okay?
Sure.
So I'll give them the benefit. I think, you have to give the benefit of the doubt on that because people forget how bad the chip shortage was around that.
And still is.
And still kind of is. So
yeah.
Being a smaller company and dealing with that, it's like, okay, I can totally understand that. But the whole time that you're struggling with the hardware and all that stuff, why aren't you just talking about the games though? Why aren't you talking about the ecosystem that you're going to build or the infrastructure? If I can give, and here's the thing, guys, I really wanted this thing to come out, okay? I'm being honest. I don't care what anybody says. Oh, Dusty Maxwell is a shill. I don't care what anybody says. I'm just a gamer. Okay, I wanted this thing to come out. I don't think it's coming out. For the people that still believe that this thing is coming out, I just want to say this to you. All they've been talking about is the hardware. The hardware, the hardware, the hardware. If this thing were to truly come out, they'd say, you know what, listen, we're doing the hardware stuff in the background, okay? We're still struggling with this. But here are the games. And here's what the store's going to look like. And here's what future games are going to look like. They're not talking about the games. The games is what that's what's going to keep any system alive, okay? It doesn't matter how powerful your console is or whatever. They're not talking about the games. And that is the overall defining thing where deep down inside, even the most extreme fans, they know it's not coming out because no one's talking about these games, man. Okay? And that's your answer. There's been no new news about anything, and it's like you could give news by just talking about the games, but you're not.
The promise of this console was that that the way to play these games was using their modernized version of the Intellivision controller, and that they were sick and tired of games being released that constantly got patched. That they were just games like how it was back in the day. None of this complicated stuff, right? Well, it turns out. The market reality say not so much.
It's changed significantly. Another thing too that was being said was this thing was supposed to come with 2 controllers. There was a brief moment in the history of this where they're like, we're going to put out a cheaper model with 1 controller. So there was even that. So it's like whatever the initial thing was in the beginning, even if it did come out now, it's not going to be what was initially promised because the finances are just not there to do that, I believe.
If you're going to say, though, if you're going to harp on the hardware and say, this is the only place and the only way to play these games, right? Like, regardless of whether or not you think the games are interesting or not, the writing was on the wall as early as a year ago. If you say you're going to release these games on a phone, on mobile platforms and other sources, then that's it. That was the death of the Amico. That was the signal. Because that wasn't for us. That was for investors to feel confident that they're going to dump this shit on the Apple Store, dump it on Google Play, and make some money back and pay back the investors that sunk their cash into this black hole of a project. And look, it's none of this is happening. The Titanic has long since hit the iceberg. This is not coming out, and I hope you can get your pre-order money back. I think that's fundamentally what's happening here. I mean, either that or you can be the guy who had that Duke Nukem Forever pre-order and he had that receipt and he finally claimed it from Electronics Boutique / GameStop 20 years later.
I guess the thing with the pre-order is that it's this weird kind of it's this weird sort of thing where I'm like, I feel like I have to get something out of this, so I'm just kind of holding on for something where they're like, I mean, this is something I'll bring up in a second of like how potentially they could save things or at least have this exist in some sort of way. But for me, I knew, like I said before, I knew that this was over. When they announced that the Earthworm Jim game was canceled, they quietly took the trailer off of their YouTube. I was like, this is it. This is it. And weirdly enough, where my journey started of Earthworm Jim bringing me to the Amico, that was the thing that in my mind, it was a red flag. And I was like, this thing is not coming out, because that was your sort of star, I guess, sort of IP for the moment. I just really thought that this console as well was going to be a place for indie devs to really, make those $3 games, those $4 games. And maybe we would get something like a Limbo every 2 to 3 months on the Intellivision Amico. You know what I mean? Like, that was my hope for it. With the whole pre-order thing, I mean, I think three things are going to happen. Okay? This is what I think is going to happen. This is Dusty's prediction. Okay? Number 1, prediction. This thing is going to quietly go away and it's not going to come out. Okay. It's not going to be this thing where you think that they're going to make some big tweet and they're going to send out some like big farewell video. It's not going to be that. It's going to quietly go away. And then at the end of 2023, they'll file for whatever bankruptcy or whatever. They're going to quietly exit and this thing is going to die. And no one's getting their money back or their pre-orders. And that's the end of that, because the world is a cruel place. And sometimes you lose, sometimes you win. And that's the first prediction. And that's probably the most likely thing that's going to happen. The second thing is this. The people that have those pre-orders, what may happen is they may do something where they do put these games up eventually on Steam, on the PlayStation 4 store, on Nintendo store, whatever else. And maybe they do something where it's like, listen, this system is not coming out. However, we're going to move forward with the games and we're going to continue to be a game company. So that $100 is going to buy you whatever, such and such. And it'll be something where you can play these games on a third-party device. And maybe they could even expand on the whole thing that they were trying to do with the NFTs and the coins and the RFID cards. I mean, the whole thing was that you would have, an NFT of the lenticular card and the coin. Maybe they do something along the lines of they have sort of an app similar to the PlayStation Stars app, where it's the Intellivision Amico something app. And, you can see the leaderboards for these games that you're playing. You can see your NFTs, similar to how you can see those NFTs in the PlayStation Stars app. Maybe they just need to admit defeat, focus on games, and move forward as a game company. And those people that have these pre-orders, they can play these games in some way, shape, or form. The last thing that I think would happen, and this is a long shot, this is a Hail Mary, is that they no longer, I don't know if they're taking any pre-orders or what the situation is.
They're still selling their physical products as far as I can see.
Yeah, so they're still doing that and they're selling the merch. But what they could do, people who have pre-orders, this is what we're doing. We're going to finish this system, but this system is going to be a one-off, similar to an Atari flashback, where we're going to load this system up with 50 classic Intellivision games. We're going to put the 6 pre-packed games on there that we promised you. The people who have those RFID cards, before we send you your unit, we will pre-install those games that you purchased. And then what you get is the Intellivision Amico with those games, and that is it. It is basically like a PlayStation Mini or a Super Nintendo Mini. It does not connect to the internet or anything. It is just a box that plays those games, and that's it. And that's the end of the Intellivision Amico.
I'll just say it's incredibly sad that some of the T-shirts that Tallarico is selling are actually pretty cool, because there's absolutely zero chance I'm giving him any of my money, because I could be down for a triple action shirt. Look, I think those are solid. I think those are solid predictions. And I think you've also listed them in order of likelihood.
Yeah. I mean, the real way to save this is to just own up to the gamers. The disappointing thing about this is that sort of the name Intellivision has now kind of been sullied with this drama. And it's kind of like, well, where do they go from here? I think that they're going to make an announcement. They have to this year. They have to. With whatever announcement they make, it's sort of what is the plan? Will they kind of own up to their errors and find a way to move forward, right? I think that's really, at this point, what people are waiting for. Because honestly, at this point for me, it's just really frustrating when you see YouTubers who are clearly investors in this company getting trial units and throwing it in the faces of everybody else like it's some weird trophy, when you have a lot of people who have invested personal finances of theirs into this concept and they're losing this money. And there's two YouTubers right now who have those systems and they do not deserve them. Those systems should have gone to places like Digital Foundry or some high caliber places that could constructively give Intellivision feedback on how to get this system across the finish line, not YouTubers in their basement.
No, but that's when you pay a focus group of people who are who are quality assurance, external people that you bring in and you pay them, not YouTubers who for what's basically access journalism.
I think the idea in the beginning of this, I think the concept was in the right place. I just think that the individuals behind it were not qualified to have a video game console in our current day of age. I think the pandemic hurt them, but the pandemic hurt everybody, okay? Big companies too. And small companies, they managed to get out of it. And Intellivision, with the money that they got from investors, I mean, they had about $7 million. That's not little money here, okay? That's enough to run your company like a startup and get a product out there if you know what you're doing, and get a console with 20 games and just milk that for the first year. I mean, Analog does it, right?
Analog does it. I mean, look, here's the other example that came to mind was Polymega, who had a much smaller plan, in fact, which was just to create a hardware that allowed you to interface with your physical games. The enthusiasts have also dragged them at various points through the ringer. But what they've not done, and I think this is the real downside of the Amico, and partly the reason why it's there, it's in the hellscape vaporware position that it's in now, is that actually there were adults behind the wheel at Polymega. And whether or not Polymega ever amounts to all it promised, and they finally get their hardware out, there wasn't people behind Polymega who were running around on YouTube and on Twitter and on forums and talking about how they were interested in listening to fair criticism, all the while simultaneously saying, but if you only heard the true story behind it, you wouldn't make those criticisms. There was no adult behind the wheel. The system had maybe an intriguing idea to begin with, but without some sober-minded people to see the project through to fruition, it was always going to be worse than the tire fire than it risked becoming. If you're going to have people who turn basically what could have been a retro gaming influenced little set-top box into a culture war, angsty circus, well, you got your circus.
The weird thing about this is that I've been addicted to hearing news about it, because I don't care who you are. The Intellivision Amico, any news I hear about it, I care about it. I care about hearing that news more than I do for PlayStation, Nintendo, or Xbox, because this is by far the most fascinating video game console.
Yes, I'm tempted to agree.
That I have never in my lifetime. I don't think we'll get another sort of episode or episodic thing like this again, because I think this was a product of the last 3 years and what we as kind of people and society experienced. There's a lot of things in the last 3 years that we could look on, whether it be a song or a film. There's certain things that exist in the last 3 years that kind of define the moment that we have lived through, the times that we have lived through. And weirdly enough, culturally, when it comes to like video games, the Intellivision Amico sort of encapsulates the sort of insanity of the last 3 years that we have put up with, right? It's like, in a weird way, I kind of wanted this thing to come out, because this would have closed the chapter on the insanity of the last 3 years that we have dealt with. This was like a weird sort of like symbolic thing that should have happened, but I don't think it will. But isn't that so fitting that the expectations that we would be able to close the chapter with this symbol, the Intellivision Amico, it's just so fitting because the unpredictability of our lives in the last 3 years have been insane. So it doesn't surprise me that this sort of concept and project it's just not going to pan out because, I mean, what the hell, right? The last 3 years certainly didn't do nothing for us, for our sanity.
Dusty, if I've learned anything in my life, it's that you especially are not allowed to have anything nice. So I'm as much as you would love to have the Amico come out and be a capstone to the past 3 years of insanity, I think what's more likely to happen is that nothing is nothing at all. And this theater of the absurd comedy will finally come to an end with nothing happening.
Thank you for tuning into the Select Gaming Podcast. Like, share, and subscribe. We create videos for the Select Gaming that are guided by our personal interests, and your support makes that possible.